The world's first battery-powered toothpaste dispenser. No, I'm joking. It's just a caulking gun from RYOBI, but it's brand new. Let's check it out. This is the PCL901 from RYOBI. Runs on their 1+ 18-volt battery system. Let's take a closer look, then we'll use it. Then we'll come back, as always, talk about pricing, warranty, what we think of it. This is RYOBI's brand new 18-volt caulking gun. They've got an old caulking gun, but this is brand new that should release in October. Still runs on the 1+ 18-volt platform. Is not an HP tool, is not a brushless tool, so it does not need or doesn't recommend a HP battery. Just got a simple 1.5 amp hour battery on here. It will be absolutely fine with this tool. So we're getting a typical brushed motor because a tool like this is a really dumb tool, meaning it doesn't need to do a lot of things. It doesn't need a brushless motor. It's got a push a plunger and a few other things are a nicety, but does not need a digital brushless motor. There's just no need for it. So I'm absolutely fine when we're still using a brushed motor in a tool like this. This is the PCL901, and as I mentioned, the 18-volt caulking gun. Now, in addition to just a trigger pull, which is just basically an on-off, so you'll see that I just basically pull, and I can pull and pull, and it's not gradually going or anything like that. Finally, I'll get to a point, it'll turn on, and it pushes the plunger. So it's basically that your trigger is just an on-off switch, and it's not a variable speed trigger. And again, I'm fine with that on a caulking gun. Here is our speed. So we've got a 6-speed dial here where we can dial in basically our max speed, which is going to be that plunger speed. And you can vary this while you have the trigger pulled. So I can slow that way down. So if I'm going along and I want to speed it up a little bit, speed it up a little bit, speed it up a little bit without letting go of the trigger, I can do that. But we do not have a variable speed trigger. We have a variable speed dial here where we can, dial in the max speed that we want out of this gun. Now the plunger here is going to be driven by the motor. At the same time, all you have to do is pull it to pull the plunger back. You don't have to click a release or anything like that, as well as if you need to set it in the tube, you can push it as well. So there's no release necessary. There's an automatic clutch type system in there that's handling that. And in addition to being able to handle that, where I can actually push and pull this without a problem, I don't have to turn it or anything, it's also handling that anti-drip technology. So as you've seen dripless caulking guns, hand caulking guns, we get the same thing in this tool as well. And I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me take a small piece of tape, give us a better vantage point of what's going on here, I think. And I'm just going to put a piece of tape around here just so we can see how close that plunger gets to here. I'm going to pull this back, and as that plunger gets close to that tape, I'm going to release the trigger, and we're going to see what happens. Getting close. I'm going to let it get really close, and I'm going to release. And you see that plunger ever so slightly comes back. As well as when I pull the trigger, you'll see there's kind of a delay, and then you'll hear a click in the gun. So you see, I can run that motor for a second or so, and it's still not going anywhere. But then when you hear the click, and then it starts moving forward. So that's that anti-drip technology. It's plunging, plunging, plunging. You release the trigger, and it's going to pull it back a bit to keep that tube from actually dripping. And we'll watch that here in a moment when we put a caulking tube in there. One more time. And you see it come back just ever so slightly. And listen for that click. You'll hear once it takes off, there it goes. And that's basically it engaging again. So it runs for a second and then it engages that into the plunger. So that's, again, that anti-drip technology where it's keeping that plunger from keeping that pressure on the tube, and then when you come back and all your caulk is, or your silicone is laid all over the place. Now, length on this tool, it's going to be pretty typical. Every caulking gun is going to be about the same. So about 15 inches from the front to the back. Now, obviously, you're going to have to, take into consideration the tip of your caulking gun, as well as if the caulking tube's new, then you're probably going to have the plunger all the way out here, and now you're looking at about 24.5 inches from front to back. Now height on this is right at 10.5 inches, so a little shorter than 10.5 inches. And then width of this is pretty good size width, about 4.5 inches wide. Now weight, this is a pretty light tool, and again, you're going to have to take into consideration whatever tube you're going with as well, but we'll go ahead and weigh it. As I mentioned, I've got a 1.5 amp hour battery on here. That can change depending on your battery. But typical weight with that 1.5 amp hour battery is 4 pounds, 2.5 ounces. So just over 4 pounds for the tool. Now also right on the tool below the trigger is a trigger lock, and that's not going to lock it on, that's going to lock it off. So if you've got a tube in there, you throw it in your truck, throw it in your toolbox, you can throw that lock, and then it's not, something's not going to accidentally hit that trigger and engage that. I'd recommend just taking the battery out or taking the tube out, but regardless, you do have that trigger lock to keep that button from being pressed. Also right here on the cartridge holder is our puncture tool, and then you slide it back up here and it tucks out of the way, holds in that little spot there, so that's really nice to have. You'll use that a lot, especially on your caulks and some of your construction adhesive, things like that. Love seeing that right there on the tool, and love the fact that it just kind of tucks away. Also, I didn't see anything in the manual or on the press release about being able to run like sausage packs and the larger cartridge holders. But with this being removable, I'm curious if that will be the case sometime soon, or if it will take some of your standard sausage packs. So your typical tube is like 10 ounces, and you can get the 16, 18 ounce sausage packs as well, where you can hold more material for construction adhesives, urethane jobs, things like that. Now, as far as force of the tool, it's supposed to have 500 pounds of pushing force, basically, and you should be able to get about 200 tubes of your standard caulk with a 2 amp hour battery. I don't think you're going to hit those limits unless you're doing a lot of caulking, maybe with construction adhesives. But bottom line is a couple of 2 amp hour batteries or a 4 amp hour battery is probably going to get you through the day rather easily. And we're going to start with some Dap Caulk, so your typical painter's acrylic latex caulk, stuff you'll find on every box store shelf. And cut that off. And by the way, I usually like to put a little flat spot on that trailing edge if you're pulling, and that squares off that caulk bead rather than making it concave. Put the tube in, push the plunger forward, okay, I'm going to run this. I'm going to put it right in the middle. I'm going to put it on speed 3. And I'm surprised by that we're not getting any run out. Usually, even on your dripless guns, when you first open your tube, you typically get some, some run out on that tip. So either this is set up a little bit, it's still pretty wet. It may be old stuff. But anyway, I'm just surprised that we're not getting some drip out of the end there. Now let's set this piece of board up and run a few beads here. Okay, again, I've got it in speed 3 here, and I'm just going to run a straight bead just to see how fast we're laying that out there. Okay, that's a good amount of material. Let me slow it down a little bit. I'm going to go to 1 and just see what it looks like there. So kind of slow to get started. Okay, so you can definitely control that, but even though you're still putting out a good amount of material in speed 1. So be aware of that when you change over to a battery-powered caulk gun or to a powered caulking gun, that it will probably dispense material faster than you're typically going with a squeeze gun. Okay, I've still got it in 1. You'll say it takes a second. I've already pulled the trigger. Now, I really didn't change my rate of speed, But you see here initially how thin it was, and then about right here it really started pouring out the material. And so that's doing a good amount of material just in speed 1. So again, be cognizant of that when you do switch over to a caulking gun. And that's not a RYOBI thing. I've seen that on just about all of the battery powered caulking guns, or even pneumatic, that it just dispenses material faster than you're used to when you're using your manual squeeze gun. Now I'm going to move it along a little bit faster here just so we can get a tighter bead. So I was probably moving twice as fast there, and still we dispensed a lot of material. So if you're really wanting tight lines and you want just a tight bead in there, you're going to have to move pretty quick when you're running caulk. Okay, let's pull out this caulk. And we'll grab some construction adhesive. A little bigger tip on that one. And we'll use our puncture tool. Guess we could wipe that off, couldn't we? I'm not even sure if this tube's going to be good. It's been sitting around a while and the plunger was almost out the bottom. And so I've still got this on 1. It's running, by the way. You can't hardly hear it. Okay, I turned it up to 6. So now I've got it on 6 with this liquid nails. And let's see what we get. A little air pocket there. You see in 6 we're dispensing quite a bit of material. Let's go down to 3. But one thing about it, it definitely does not have a problem putting it out. And one thing, this is urethane adhesive, typical construction adhesive. One thing this is similar to would be seam sealer on a vehicle. So if you're running seam sealer, you're at a body shop, something like this. Same thing with seam sealer as with construction adhesive. It's going to flow about the same amount. Of course, it depends on whether you're running self-leveling or high build or what you're running. But same typical stuff, urethane adhesive. And here's some different stuff. This is Fast Grab, which I think is usually a little thicker. Going to run it up to 6 just to dispense it out, get it going. Looks like it might be dried up. Nope, nope, there we go. So it's automatically shutting off, and it's because that tube is so old, so it does have a shut off in it to actually protect the tool. After a few seconds, I can pull the trigger again. So that is in 6. I'm going to slow it down to 3. So no problem dispensing that And that is some old stuff and some thick stuff. And then finally, let's use some, this is wall base adhesive. This stuff's usually pretty forgiving, but just something different. You see how this stuff leveling out looks a lot like seam sealer does. In fact, I'm gonna, a lot of times this floor adhesive, you'll squirt through like a flat, kind of almost a multi-tube tool. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten that tip there. And this is what you would put down like your vinyl baseboard stuff in a lot of your commercial buildings around bathrooms and hallways, things like that. Usually flows pretty easily. That's in 3. Let's run it up to 6. Yeah, it flows that great. It's like a little dripping. Well, it operates about like a caulking gun should. No, seriously. As far as power, it's got the power to dispense some of the heavier duty liquids like the polyurethane, the urethane like we use in glass installations, construction adhesive, seam sealer, caulk, definitely. But just a word of caution, as I mentioned, if you're running this to run like 100% silicone or like caulking around windows, I would recommend to get some use under your belt because it's definitely going to flow more material than you're used to. Now, the cool thing about it is you're not having to use that pumping action. So once you learn how to use this, you can get a smoother bead, if you will, as you learn to use it, because it's going to seamlessly just continue to add that material at the same flow rate. I do like also that we can change that flow rate right there on the fly. If you're running a long bead, you can slow that down, speed it up. Also, a word of caution as well, every time it seems to start a little slower or dispense a little less liquid, it's not liquid, dispense a little less material initially, and then it kind of gradually gets more, that first, say, 1 to 3 inches, and then it pretty much stays the same rate. So just look out for those things when you first pick up a cordless caulking gun like the PCL901. Otherwise, this works fine, and that, I'm telling you, I've seen that across all caulking guns. I've not seen one yet that didn't have those attributes to it, so no different on the RYOBI. But $79 for this, and that's bare tool. So bare tool is $79, and then you can get it, you can probably pick up a 1.5 amp hour, 2 amp hour battery, and you're going to be absolutely fine with this. If you want to run a 4 amp hour in it, you can, or whatever size you want to. But a 1.5 or 2 amp hour is going to keep it lighter, as well as probably dispense as much material as you want to. Features are great on it. You know, the trigger lock to lock it so that you can put it away or put it in your toolbox or whatever. That works great. You're going to get a 3-year warranty on this. Again, it's the PCL901. Check it out. You should hit the shelves in October, so basically in a couple of weeks you should start seeing it at Home Depot or on HomeDepot.com. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, then give us a thumbs down, but would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day. Keep smiling.